Hi, I'm Ernabel Demillo. Welcome to Asian American Life. In this special literary edition, we are celebrating the works of Asian American authors and how they've changed the literary landscape. Many of their best-selling titles are sold right here at the Kinokuniya bookstore. Kinokuniya first opened its doors in Tokyo in 1927. Today, they're the largest bookstore chain in Japan and have nearly 100 stores worldwide, including the Middle East, Australia, and the United States. Here at the New York headquarters, you'll find everything from Japanese and Asian American novels to comics and anime. Asian American writers have been publishing since the 1880s, but little is known about their history and how they became award-winning bestsellers. In the late 19th century, Asian American literature focused on the struggles of assimilating into American life. At the turn of the century, works like Sui Sin Far's Mrs. Spring Fragrances and Young-Hil Kang's The Grass Roof showed the Asian American experiences to the mainstream audience and were well received by critics. After the Chinese Exclusion Act was repealed in 1943, Chinese American literature grew in popularity. Jade Snow Wong's Fifth Chinese Daughter, a story about the daughter of immigrant parents navigating both her Chinese and American heritage, captured the hearts of America. By the 1950s, many Japanese American writers wrote about their internment experiences during World War II, which drew the attention of scholars. But it was the novel Flower Drum Song which caught Broadway's and Hollywood's attention, putting Asian American literature on the stage and screen. The 1970s was a period of student activism. Asian American writers like Frank Chin, Jeffrey Paul Chan, and Lawson Fusao Inada broke new grounds by defying Asian American stereotypes. By the 1980s and 90s, Maxine Hong Kingston's The Woman Warrior, Amy Tan's Joy Luck Club, and David Henry Hwang's M. Butterfly achieved critical and commercial success, elevating Asian American literature to mainstream popularity. Today, while the Asian American experience remains a common theme for many authors, writers like Jhumpa Lahiri and Bill Chang have found success exploring new genres and voices. Their literature has inspired a new generation of authors to take risks and share their stories. To learn more about the show, like our Facebook page at Asian American Life. Now let's take a look at some of the best-selling authors we're featuring. In the Country, Kyung-yoon meets Mia Alvar, this year's PEN Literary Award winner. The Expatriates, Paul Lin talks with Janice Y.K. Lee, who explores expats living in Hong Kong. Plus, Mystery to Me, why few Asian American women write in this genre. And Minnie Rowe meets One Doggone Happy Canine, whose book is the talk of the town. This and more on Asian American Life. This year, many Asian American authors have garnered literary praise and are climbing the bestseller list. Here's more.
I'm Kyung-yoon. The writer Mia Alvar recently won the prestigious PEN Bingham Prize for debut fiction for her collection of short stories that give voice to the Filipino diaspora from different countries and classes.
There were so many people in my family and in my larger community who I was curious about and interested in basing characters on.
Mia Alvar says that's what led her to write a collection of short stories about overseas Filipinos, spanning different time periods and countries.
In the decade since I left, she hadn't aged exactly. To my eyes, she seemed not older, but more frail, more tired, softer spoken.
Her book, In the Country, brings to life the stories of Filipino men and women who, like many of her aunts, uncles, and her own father, left their homeland in search of better jobs and opportunities, often to support their families back home.
These are men and women who I grew up with, some of them in my own family, and so I wanted to know about their love lives and what they did for fun.
Her stories also have a historical context, including the title story, which is set during the martial law years of Ferdinand Marcos, culminating in the murder of opposition leader Ninoy Aquino and the People Power Revolution in 1986 that led to his wife, Corazon Aquino, becoming president.
So help me God.
But the focus of Alvar's stories is seldom on the history makers. Rather, it's the everyday working people, giving readers a personal lens on how historic events affect ordinary citizens.
The settings of the book are taken from the settings where I grew up, the Philippines, the Middle East, and the U.S.
Home for Alvar is now New York City. Born in Manila 38 years ago, she lived there until the age of 6 when her family moved to the Middle East. At the time, she says her family was reeling from the devastating loss of her older brother, who had passed away 2 years earlier. The Philippines in the early 1980s was also a very unstable, turbulent place.
The Philippines was under martial law. People were sort of unsure of their economic future in the country. And my parents were also grieving this loss. So when they had the opportunity to leave and go to Bahrain, we took it.
Her father found a job with the Ministry of Tourism in Bahrain, and her mother worked part-time as a school teacher. After 4 years, the family picked up and moved to New York when her mother got the opportunity to pursue an advanced degree in special education at Columbia University.
My parents grew up without much. My mother was one in 8 children. My father was one in many more, I think. And there was always this sense that upward mobility was possible and that education was very central to both their upbringings. And they certainly tried to impart that to my generation.
The Harvard-educated Alvar says that she hopes her writing, along with that of other Asian American authors, can be an addition to a fuller American story and not be marginalized on a special shelf in fiction.
I think when I was growing up as a kid and looking for books that represented my family's experience or communities that resembled mine, it was often kind of set aside as a category of its own. Asian American literature, people are realizing that it's not just Indian American lives or Filipino American lives, it's everybody's life.
The winner of the Penn Robert W. Bingham Prize for debut fiction is Mia Alvar for In the Country.
In April, Alvar was honored by the Penn Literary Awards for Best Debut Fiction, which includes a $25,000 prize. And her book was named one of the best books of the year by The New Yorker, the San Francisco Chronicle, NPR, Huffington Post, Kirkus Reviews, BuzzFeed, and many others.
Did you expect this kind of response, the Penn Award and this kind of being nominated for all sorts of prizes?
No, I mean, I was hoping for a good response. I had spent so long writing the book, almost 10 years. So by the time it was over, I just really wanted to write the best book I could.
What does a prize like that mean for the shelf life of a book?
Oh, it makes a huge difference, and I think even the nomination was fantastic because that it'll have a little sticker in a lot of bookstores, and it'll just have that extra little bit of validation that helps, I think.
And Mia Alvar is now working on a full-length novel that builds on the themes of migration and diaspora, topics that are clearly close to her heart and experiences. I'm Kyung Yoon for Asian American Life.
I'm Paul Lin. The Expatriates is a new book by Janice Lee. It's a page-turning follow-up to her debut novel, The Piano Teacher, which made Janice a New York Times best-selling author. We caught up with Janice at her publisher, Viking Books. She and her family recently returned to New York after living 10 years in Hong Kong.
The world that's described in the Expatriates is very much very similar to the one that I was living in. So that's a lot of observation. The characters in the book are all imagination.
Janice had moved to Hong Kong after her husband Joseph Bay signed with private equity firm KKR to boost its business in Asia. She became a so-called trailing spouse, complete with the perks of expat life, like live-in domestic help.
The ubiquity of help leads to a certain kind of culture where people have a lot of help. They don't have to do laundry, they don't have to wash the dishes. It just fosters a different attitude. Let's have a dinner party. You know, it's not work.
We get an insider's glimpse into this world. The clubs, the lunches women do, the social detail helps ground her protagonists. Women, mothers struggling with vastly different lives, but all uprooted from somewhere else and plunked down in Hong Kong. Janice also uses great detail to describe settings and neighborhoods, as she does in a passage featuring one of the main characters, Margaret.
Margaret loves driving in the open, empty streets early in the morning, seeing the world slowly wake up. She sees both women and men in clothes from the night before. She thinks that anyone up at this hour is a saint or a scoundrel or a little bit lost.
Yeah, I think that we're all a little bit lost. Certainly, if you're reading the book, it's something that makes you more keyed in. Perhaps a lot of people identify with that kind of a statement that really brings them into this world.
I think it's more interesting to read about people who are lost than read about people who are perfectly settled. There would be very little to write about.
Janice's unique perspective on Hong Kong benefits from actually having grown up there in a Korean family. Hong Kong is more than 90% Chinese, so Janice never really felt a part of things until she went to school.
I think as a child you want to belong, so it was one of those things I always remember, feeling like an outsider. But then I went to the American school there, which is an international school and quite global. There were all sorts of cultures there, and it was really there that I found, oh, I belong here. And as a child, that was really wonderful.
But being an outsider had its benefits, especially for Janice, the writer.
I've always said that I felt like an outsider wherever I've gone throughout my life, and I actually think that's a good thing, because I think that being an outsider is very important for a writer, because you have the distance to observe somewhat objectively.
Your current book, The Expatriates, is a real page-turner and fun to read quickly. Was it fun to write as well? Is writing a quick process for you? What is it like?
I think that novels are really difficult, and I always say that the process of writing for me is a lot like childbirth, because it's so painful and intense, and you forget about it, and that's why you do it again.
The childbirth metaphor really does work for Janice. She started writing her first novel, The Piano Teacher, when she was pregnant with her first child. By the time she was ready to finish it, she had 2 kids and twins on the way. She was on bed rest when the deadline loomed.
And I knew I had to get this book in, so I was lying down on the bed, propped up by all these pillows, like sort of doing this. And the deadline kept creeping closer and closer, and what happened was I ended up emailing it on a Friday, and then I think my body just sort of let go, and then I had the twins on a Tuesday.
There is a passage, a descriptive passage, about the way people view motherhood, especially if you're maybe 20 and you're not really understanding where people are coming from as far as being a parent and having children. Maybe if you could read from that. I believe it's a character named Mercy in your book.
That's right, it's Mercy, the narcissistic 20-year-old. So, this is what parents did. They told you stories about children and were outraged or delighted by some odd detail, and were perplexed if you were not appropriately outraged or delighted as well. They lived so entirely in that sphere of people with kids, that they forgot that people could have no kids and have no idea what they were talking about.
Janice lived this life when she was just out of college and working in New York for Elle magazine and Mirabella. She wrote about books and worked as an editor, but wanted to write novels. So she got her MFA at Hunter College in a creative writing program started by author Chang-Rae Lee.
It took a lot of thought to decide whether I wanted to leave this magazine editor world, which I really enjoyed. But I thought, oh, if I don't do it now, I don't know when I'm going to do it, and I should just do it when I'm young.
Her first book took longer than she expected and wouldn't be published until almost a decade after she quit working for magazines. By then, motherhood had already changed her life forever.
I had no idea what it was like to be a mother. It was a complete, overturning of my entire world. I think everyone writes about how wonderful it is, but it's also so terrible at times because it's so painful and you're so hormonal and your whole life has changed and you step through this door and you can never step back in to the other world. You're a mother.
Coming back to New York from Hong Kong, Janice says, is like returning to her spiritual home, the place she started to write professionally. And she's at it again.
I'm working on a short story that's about 3 couples at a dinner party, and I don't know if that short story is going to prolong itself and become a novel.
It may surprise you to hear where else you may find Janice's work. She tells me she wouldn't mind trying her hand at TV writing. Right now, she feels there's plenty of good writing in television. I'm Paul Lin for Asian American Life.
Mysteries are one of the top sellers in publishing, but there are few Asian Americans writing in this genre. I met up with 2 authors who shared their secrets in crime fiction.
Shocked silence greeted the news that Sano couldn't believe. Security in the palace was the tightest in Japan. How could someone have stabbed the shogun?
Books can transport you to another time. In the Sano and Chiro mystery series, readers are transported back to feudal Japan, the time of samurais.
I describe it as a 17th century samurai detective solves murders in ancient Japan.
Laura Jo Rowland is the author behind the popular series, starting with Shinju to the Iris Fan, 18 books in total. Rowland is one of a handful of Asian American women mystery writers today.
If you look at the New York Times bestseller list, most of these books are not about Asian characters. They're not by Asian authors, and publishers are very much driven by sales numbers, and they will take that into serious consideration and see, well, we can't really market this type of book because there's not a big enough audience for it. I happen to think they're underestimating readers and the kind of things that readers are willing to take a chance on.
Rowland's path to writing was quite unconventional. Laura, so you call yourself an accidental writer. Can you explain?
Well, I'm not one of those people that always wanted to be a writer when I was growing up. I thought writing was something dull that you did for school because you had to.
Rowland is second-generation American. Her father was born in a log cabin in Wyoming. Her mother was born in Detroit. Rowland grew up in a nearby suburb.
My family was the only family in that small suburb of Detroit that was not white, which meant that my brother and I went through kindergarten through 12th grade as the only Asian and non-white children in the whole school system.
In college, she majored in microbiology and got her master's in environmental health. Later, when she was living in New Orleans, on a whim, she took an illustration class.
The day I walked into the class, they said, well, you're going to write a children's book.
Rowland the scientist became Rowland the author. She wrote her first book, Shinju, in 1994, introducing mystery fans to Sano and Chiro, a samurai detective. In 2014, after 17 best-selling books, Sano's story came to an end. What was that like for you to write the final book? Like, how did you know that this was going to be the end of the series?
I looked at how old my characters were. My God, Sano was 50. My God, I'm even older, but we won't get into that. But I was feeling restless in a way because when you're on a creative project, at some point, you don't want to stick to that forever. You need to move on.
But don't worry, Rowland fans. She has more books coming. Rowland's next series is set during the time of Jack the Ripper. Meanwhile, hoping to follow in Rowland's footsteps is Radha Vatsal. We all met at the mysterious bookshop in Tribeca, where Vatsal's planning a book party for her debut mystery novel, The Front Page Affair. The book's central character is Kitty Weeks, a female journalist living in 1910s New York.
I wanted to create a heroine that I could obviously identify with. So Kitty is American, but she's lived all of her life abroad. Her father is a businessman. He travels through Asia, so she grew up there, and she goes to boarding school in Switzerland, and then she comes to New York when she's 19, so she kind of has a similar perspective. She's sort of formed but sort of unformed at the same time.
Vatsal's life is not too different from her heroine.
So I was born in Mumbai, India, and I was raised there. I lived there with my family till I was 16. And when I was 16, the admissions officer from a prep school in Connecticut came to my school, and he was, looking for some more diversity for the school, some international students, and I applied, and I got in.
She stayed in the U.S. and got her doctoral degree in English from Duke University, and she knew that one day she would write a book. The Front Page Affair, which came out this May, was inspired by 1910's action film heroines.
The first action films that were made in the U.S. actually had women as the lead characters, and there were several of them. There was Pearl White, there was Kathleen Williams, Helen Holmes, and they did all kinds of things. They drove cars, they chased villains, they brandished guns. They did everything that you would expect to see a male star do.
Book number 2 is due out next year, and who knows, maybe Kitty Weeks will find herself in a series of adventures just like Sano the Samurai. I'm Ernabel Demillo for Asian American Life.
I'm Minnie Rowe. This may look like just any lovable pet, but Bodie is no ordinary dog. He makes more money than the average American, and he has a calendar and a book about him.
At first glance, Bodie is just your average dog. He loves a good belly rub, checking out interesting smells in mysterious corners, and meeting other four-legged friends in the park.
Bodie, look here.
But when it's showtime, Bodie sheds his doggy persona and becomes Bodie, the menswear dog. Stylish, classic, debonair.
Aw, Bodie, that's wonderful.
We met Bodie, a 7-year-old Shiba Inu, and his owner Yena Kim outside the Barking Dog on New York City's Upper East Side. I asked Kim about Bodie's overnight transformation from lovable pet to internet sensation.
One lazy afternoon, Dave and I had watched Wes Anderson's Fantastic Mr. Fox, and you know how he looks like a fox.
So Kim and her husband, Dave Fung, thought it would be funny to dress up Bodie in Fung's clothes and snap some pictures.
We fully expected him to run away, but he just kind of sat there and started smiling, and we were so confused by it all. So he snapped a few more photos, and then we posted it to our personal Facebook thinking our friends would just giggle at it.
It got rave reviews from their friends who suggested that this had the potential to be more than just a one-time gag.
So the next day, we spent some time putting together a Tumblr and some social media channels for him, just as a joke. And the Monday, so the day after the Sunday, got picked up by GQ's blog. And from there, it just, networked into the internet.
From there, it went viral. Menswear Dog, Bodie's stage name, became such a hit that Kim and Fung quit their day jobs to manage Bodie's career as a model.
Honestly, we didn't expect it at all, and we, didn't have any business plans for this or anything. We were just happy that people responded to it positively.
Bodie has modeled for top designers like Salvatore Ferragamo, Coach, and Banana Republic, to name a few. He typically earns several $1,000s per modeling shoot, even more than some of his human male model counterparts. He has more than 200,000 Instagram and Facebook likes, a calendar in 2014 with another one in the works for 2017.
It is absolutely surprising, and I'm so thankful for it because none of this was expected, and just happy I get to work with my dog. Can't complain.
Kim and Fung even published a book 2 years ago called Menswear Dog Presents the New Classics, which has been translated into 4 languages, including Korean, Chinese, and Estonian. It's a style guide that organizes men's wardrobe from spring to winter, highlighting key items every well-heeled man needs, as well as helpful tips.
A great leather jacket is going to last you a very long time. And we show you how to take care of it, we show you how to style it with other items, and the best part is everything is modeled by Bodie.
Dressing up pets is nothing new. There are vintage photos of dogs dressed in human clothes dating back to the early 1900s. And if you Google pets dressed up, you can find a whole slew of sometimes rather unfortunate results. So what sets Bodie apart? Kim believes it was a combination of her background as a fashion designer, her husband's as a graphic designer, their social media savvy, and most of all, Bodie's good looks that propelled Menswear Dog into international stardom.
I have to thank him as well because he just has the perfect face for it and the proportions for it.
Just like any model, Bodie has his up and down days. Then it's showtime. Bodie sits patiently, the consummate professional, as Kim dolls him up in the latest trendy fashions, fixes his fur, fusses over him, and pumps him up.
Oh, look, now he's posing. And I turn on some music for him, and he really gets into that chill zone, and that's the best time to take photos.
While on the surface, it may look like Kim is just playing around with her dog, but she is quick to point out that it truly is a full-time job.
I don't think a lot of people realize how much work that is because it's such a feel-good territory. They're like, oh, that's just a shirt on a dog. But a lot of work actually goes behind it.
Kim says Bodie is a natural-born model and people pleaser, and thinks he loves the attention as much as she loves lavishing it onto him.
Especially when we go to events, it's funny because in the car he'll just be like sitting there and we get out, and when we walk through the door and there's cameras and there's people, he lights up and he starts smiling. And this is something that I can't teach, obviously, but he does it. And so it makes me feel like he does enjoy it. I hope so.
Bodie has a new sister, a 5-month-old Shiba puppy named Dylan. No word on whether the brother and sister will become a modeling duo. I'm Minnie Rowe for Asian American Life.
We hope you enjoyed our show. Be sure to stop by the Kinokuniya bookstore, the largest Asian bookstore chain in America. And to learn more about our stories, like our Facebook page at Asian American Life. I'm Ernabel Demillo. We'll see you next time.